Have you ever wondered whether the greatest achievement of ancient Greece wasn't its philosophers, its democracy, or even the Parthenon, but something almost nobody ever saw? Imagine walking across a peaceful hillside where goats graze and olive trees sway in the Mediterranean breeze, completely unaware that beneath your feet lies another world carved into solid stone thousands of years ago. Hidden corridors stretch for miles through darkness, forgotten escape routes vanish beneath ruined temples, and silent water channels continue flowing long after the kingdoms that built them disappeared. History usually celebrates what stands above the ground, yet civilizations often survive because of what they hide below it. That simple idea changes the way we look at ancient engineering forever. We tend to picture Greek civilization through marble statues and open-air theaters bathed in sunlight, but those famous monuments tell only half the story. Beneath bustling marketplaces and magnificent palaces existed an invisible infrastructure that quietly determined whether cities prospered or perished. Underground construction was not merely an engineering curiosity, it represented an entirely different philosophy of survival. While armies admired towering walls and imposing gates, Greek planners understood that true security often came from remaining unseen. It is fascinating that some of humanity's most brilliant innovations were intentionally designed never to be admired. Their success depended on secrecy rather than spectacle. Looking deeper, these tunnels reveal a civilization obsessed with preparation instead of reaction. They planned for invasion before enemies arrived, for drought before rivers failed, and for political betrayal before conspiracies unfolded. Such thinking feels remarkably modern. Today we build backup servers, emergency shelters, and redundant infrastructure for resilience. Ancient Greek engineers pursued exactly the same goal using stone, mathematics, and relentless determination. Every hidden corridor tells us that intelligence often defeats raw strength. Geography also played an unexpected role. Greece's rocky limestone landscape, viewed by many as difficult terrain, became an opportunity for creative minds willing to exploit nature instead of fighting it. The soft yet stable rock allowed generations of builders to shape entire underground worlds with primitive tools and extraordinary patience. Their achievements remind us that technological progress depends as much on imagination as equipment. A simple hammer in the hands of a visionary can reshape history. Throughout this journey, we will descend beneath temples, cities, mines, and battlefields to uncover forgotten stories where engineers, rulers, priests, soldiers, and ordinary families all relied upon darkness to preserve the future. The deeper we travel underground, the clearer one truth becomes. The hidden foundations of civilization are often more important than the monuments standing proudly above them, and perhaps humanity's greatest masterpieces are the ones almost nobody was ever meant to see. If hidden tunnels represented the invisible skeleton of ancient Greece, then the minds that designed them deserve as much admiration as the generals who commanded armies above ground. Modern audiences often imagine ancient builders relying on luck and brute force, yet the archaeological evidence suggests something far more remarkable. These engineers possessed an intuitive understanding of geometry, geology, and long-term planning that rivals many later civilizations. They weren't simply carving holes through rock, they were solving complex problems where a single mistake could doom an entire city. Consider the challenge from their perspective. There were no laser levels, no satellite positioning systems, and no computer simulations to calculate structural stress. Every decision depended upon observation, experience, and mathematical reasoning passed from one generation to the next. When workers began digging into a mountainside, they committed themselves to years of labor without certainty that the project would even succeed. One slight error in direction could leave two tunnel teams separated forever by solid stone. That willingness to trust knowledge over certainty reflects a confidence that defined Greek innovation across philosophy, science, and engineering alike. Even more impressive is how ancient builders transformed natural limitations into strategic advantages. Limestone, often considered an obstacle for agriculture and construction, became an ally underground. Its workable consistency allowed tunnels to be shaped with relative precision while maintaining structural stability for centuries. Rather than forcing nature to submit, Greek engineers adapted their methods to the landscape, demonstrating a lesson modern designers increasingly embrace through sustainable architecture and environmental planning. History repeatedly shows that civilizations flourish when they cooperate with geography instead of resisting it. Yet technical brilliance alone cannot explain the existence of these hidden worlds. Behind every corridor stood countless laborers whose names history never recorded. While rulers received glory and architects earned prestige, anonymous workers endured darkness, dust, exhaustion, and constant danger. Their daily reality was measured not in philosophical debates, but in aching muscles and the fear of collapsing ceilings. This contrast reminds us that every great civilization rests upon invisible sacrifices. Magnificent achievements rarely emerge without ordinary people performing extraordinary labor. There is another fascinating psychological dimension to underground construction. Human beings instinctively seek sunlight and open horizons, making prolonged work beneath the earth emotionally taxing. The builders had to overcome not only physical hardship, but also the primal discomfort of enclosed darkness. That persistence reveals remarkable discipline and communal purpose. They believed the future security of their families justified years spent creating spaces they themselves might never fully use. Such long-term thinking feels increasingly rare in a world often driven by immediate rewards. Looking back across thousands of years, perhaps the greatest engineering achievement was not the tunnels themselves, but the mindset that produced them. A culture willing to invest immense effort into protecting generations yet unborn. Stone eventually erodes, kingdoms eventually fall, and monuments eventually crumble. But the philosophy of building resilient foundations continues to shape societies long after individual builders disappear into history. Most people assume ancient tunnels existed simply to help someone escape, but that assumption dramatically underestimates the strategic genius of Greek civilization. An escape route is only valuable after disaster strikes, while the most effective underground networks prevented disasters from becoming fatal in the first place. Hidden beneath bustling cities flowed an invisible system of life support that quietly sustained thousands of people every single day. Water, the most valuable resource in the ancient world, became both a vulnerability and an opportunity. Armies could surround walls, destroy farmland, and blockade roads, but they could not easily defeat an enemy whose lifeline flowed beneath their own feet. This is where Greek engineering transformed into strategic thinking. Instead of building bigger reservoirs that invaders could locate, they built invisible arteries carrying fresh mountain water directly into the heart of their cities. Every drop that arrived underground represented another day of survival and another day of frustration for besieging armies waiting outside. It is remarkable how often history is shaped not by spectacular battles, but by quiet logistical victories that almost nobody witnesses. Modern military analysts frequently say that amateurs study tactics while professionals study logistics, and ancient Greece appears to have understood this principle thousands of years before it was formally articulated. A city with food and water could resist overwhelming odds, while a thirsty army behind magnificent walls would eventually surrender regardless of courage. Underground aqueducts therefore served as silent weapons, every bit as powerful as bronze spears or stone fortifications. They attacked the enemy's expectations rather than the enemy itself. Imagine the psychological effect on an invading force expecting starvation to weaken defenders within days, only to watch smoke continue rising from kitchens weeks later while citizens remained healthy and disciplined. Confusion would spread through the attacking camp. Rumors would circulate that the gods favored the city, or that secret allies continued delivering supplies. In reality, mathematics and engineering quietly defeated assumptions born from conventional warfare. This invisible advantage highlights an enduring truth. Knowledge often creates forms of power that opponents cannot even recognize until it is too late. The underground environment itself provided another unexpected benefit. Naturally stable temperatures preserved food far better than exposed storage buildings vulnerable to heat and seasonal fluctuations. Grain, olive oil, wine, and dried provisions could survive longer beneath the earth, allowing communities to prepare for emergencies years in advance. Rather than viewing tunnels solely as corridors, the Greeks effectively transformed them into climate-controlled infrastructure centuries before refrigeration existed. Such ingenuity reflects a civilization that consistently found sophisticated solutions using simple natural principles. Looking through the lens of modern resilience planning, these ancient systems resemble backup power grids, emergency supply chains, and disaster preparedness programs rolled into one interconnected network. They remind us that true strength rarely comes from visible displays of force. Instead, lasting security grows from careful preparation carried out quietly, patiently, and often completely unnoticed until the moment crisis arrives. The greatest victories are sometimes won long before the first battle begins, hidden beneath ordinary streets where no enemy ever thinks to look. While hidden aqueducts preserved entire populations, there existed another class of underground passages reserved for only a privileged few, and these reveal an entirely different side of Greek civilization. Behind the image of noble philosophers debating virtue and justice stood rulers who understood a timeless reality. Power attracts enemies. Every palace, no matter how magnificent, was also a potential prison if surrounded by assassins, rebels, or invading armies. As a result, beneath polished marble floors and lavish ceremonial halls often lay secret corridors known only to the closest circle of trust. These tunnels tell us something profoundly human. Even kings who appeared untouchable in public carried private fears that wealth and authority could never erase. Their hidden escape routes were physical expressions of insecurity disguised as preparation. Ironically, the higher someone climbed within society, the more desperately they searched for unseen exits. It is a pattern that echoes throughout history, from medieval castles to modern government bunkers, proving that political power rarely eliminates fear. It simply changes its form. Yet these passages were far more than emergency exits. They functioned as strategic assets capable of preserving continuity of government. A ruler who escaped capture could regroup loyal forces, negotiate alliances, or organize resistance instead of allowing the collapse of an entire state through one successful attack. In that sense, tunnels protected institutions as much as individuals. Modern constitutional systems rely upon succession plans and continuity protocols. Ancient Greece achieved similar resilience through hidden architecture carved beneath stone foundations. Such foresight demonstrates that infrastructure can serve political stability just as effectively as military strength. Equally fascinating is the incredible creativity employed to conceal these entrances. Ancient builders understood that the strongest door is useless if everyone knows where it is. A staircase hidden beneath a bathing chamber, a movable altar concealing a descending corridor, or an ordinary storage room masking a royal escape route all exploited human psychology rather than brute force. People see what they expect to see. Guards walked across hidden trapdoors every day without suspicion because their minds accepted familiar surroundings as safe. The greatest camouflage often lies not in invisibility but in ordinary appearance. This principle continues to influence everything from espionage to cybersecurity in the modern world, where threats and defenses alike increasingly hide in plain sight. Beyond their practical value, these secret passages symbolize a deeper contradiction within civilization itself. Societies strive to project confidence, permanence, and order, yet beneath those confident surfaces often exist contingency plans acknowledging uncertainty and vulnerability. Ancient Greek rulers celebrated public authority while privately investing enormous resources preparing for failure. Rather than hypocrisy, perhaps this reflects wisdom. True leadership requires optimism balanced by realism. The willingness to imagine worst-case scenarios often ensures they never occur. As we descend further into the underground world of Greece, a surprising pattern emerges again and again. The civilization remembered for open debate, public squares, and visible monuments quietly depended upon invisible systems that ordinary citizens rarely saw. History celebrates sunlight, but survival was frequently secured in darkness, where careful planning waited patiently beneath every stone until the moment it became indispensable. As impressive as hidden escape routes may seem, the true genius of ancient Greek tunnels emerged when they transformed from places of refuge into instruments of war. Most civilizations invested enormous wealth in building taller walls, thicker gates, and stronger towers, believing that defense depended upon creating barriers no enemy could cross. Greek military engineers approached the problem differently. Instead of asking how to break through walls, they asked a far more dangerous question. What if the wall itself could be made irrelevant? That shift in thinking changed siege warfare forever. An army could spend months battering a fortress with rams and catapults, while defenders confidently watched from above. But beneath the noise, another battle might already be unfolding in silence. Teams of diggers worked by torchlight, slowly advancing under enemy foundations, removing the very ground that supported seemingly invincible fortifications. The battlefield extended into the earth itself, where patience became more valuable than brute force. It is a reminder that the most devastating attacks are often those an opponent never realizes are happening until the final moment. Yet underground warfare demanded extraordinary courage. Imagine crawling through a narrow passage barely wide enough to breathe, surrounded by darkness, knowing that thousands of tons of rock press overhead, while enemy soldiers may be digging toward you from the opposite direction. Every strike of a hammer echoes through the stone, creating a terrifying uncertainty about who might arrive first. Unlike battles fought under open skies, tunnel combat removed visibility, formation, and even orientation. Victory depended on discipline and nerve rather than spectacle. Modern audiences accustomed to dramatic battlefield charges rarely appreciate how psychologically exhausting such invisible warfare must have been. Even more fascinating is the intelligence displayed by defenders who learned to listen to the earth itself. Rather than waiting for walls to collapse, they developed methods to detect subtle vibrations traveling through stone, interpreting faint sounds as warnings of hidden danger. This represents one of humanity's earliest examples of underground surveillance technology. Long before electronic sensors and seismic detectors existed, careful observation and practical experience allowed cities to anticipate threats hidden beyond ordinary perception. Once again, Greek innovation reveals an enduring lesson. Superior awareness often outweighs superior strength, but perhaps the greatest weapon tunnels offered was uncertainty. An invading commander never truly knew how many hidden passages existed, where defenders might emerge, or whether an apparently abandoned corridor concealed traps waiting just ahead. Fear thrives in environments where information is incomplete. Every dark intersection became a possible ambush, every unexplored chamber a potential disaster. By forcing enemies to question their own assumptions, underground architecture became a psychological battlefield as much as a physical one. History repeatedly demonstrates that uncertainty can weaken armies more effectively than casualties alone. Looking beyond military history, this strategy carries surprising relevance today. Whether in business, politics, cybersecurity, or personal challenges, success often belongs not to those who appear strongest, but to those who think differently from everyone else. Ancient Greek tunnel warfare reminds us that innovation begins when someone stops attacking the obvious obstacle and instead discovers an entirely new path beneath it. Sometimes the shortest route to victory is the one nobody else imagines exists, until the ground suddenly shifts beneath their feet. There is one aspect of ancient Greece that often surprises modern historians more than hidden fortresses or secret escape passages, and that is the extraordinary relationship between religion and engineering. Today, we tend to separate science from spirituality, viewing one as rational and the other as symbolic, but for the ancient Greeks the boundary was far less defined. Their sacred places were carefully designed environments where architecture, psychology, acoustics, and belief worked together to create unforgettable experiences. Descending into a temple's underground chambers was never intended to be an ordinary walk through stone corridors. It was a carefully orchestrated journey from the familiar world into a realm that felt mysterious, timeless, and divine. The darkness itself became part of the ritual. As sunlight disappeared behind the visitor, every sound grew louder, every shadow more dramatic, and every whisper seemed charged with supernatural significance. Modern neuroscience tells us that unfamiliar environments heighten emotional sensitivity, making people more receptive to powerful experiences. Without knowing the scientific terminology, ancient builders instinctively understood how physical surroundings could influence human perception. The underground world became a stage where faith was amplified by architecture. Perhaps nowhere is this more fascinating than in the famous sanctuaries, where pilgrims traveled enormous distances seeking answers about their futures. Visitors arrived carrying fears about war, marriage, harvests, or political decisions, hoping divine wisdom would guide them. Yet before hearing a single prophecy, they had already undergone an emotional transformation simply by entering spaces deliberately engineered to inspire awe. Narrow corridors opened into echoing chambers, flickering torchlight danced across rough stone walls, and hidden ventilation shafts carried unusual scents through the darkness. Every element subtly reinforced the belief that ordinary reality had been left behind. Whether one interprets these experiences as genuine spirituality or brilliant theatrical design, the result was undeniably powerful. This combination of architecture and psychology offers an intriguing lesson about human nature. People rarely judge experiences solely by facts. They are deeply influenced by atmosphere, expectation, and emotion. Ancient Greek priests may not have possessed modern scientific language, but they recognized that environment shapes belief. Their underground sanctuaries became immersive experiences centuries before museums, cinemas, or virtual reality attempted similar goals. They understood that the journey toward an answer could be as meaningful as the answer itself. Hidden corridors also served practical purposes during times of crisis. Sacred treasures, religious artifacts, and temple officials could disappear through concealed routes, while invaders looted visible buildings above. To outside observers, it might appear that divine forces had protected the sanctuary, reinforcing its reputation and attracting future pilgrims. Once again, careful planning merged seamlessly with symbolism. The practical and the spiritual became impossible to separate. Looking across history, we find this pattern repeated again and again. The greatest civilizations succeed not merely by mastering technology, but by understanding the human imagination. Ancient Greece built tunnels that carried water, armies, rulers, and messages. Yet perhaps their most enduring achievement was creating underground spaces capable of carrying something even more powerful: belief itself. In those silent chambers beneath the earth, engineering quietly became storytelling, and stone transformed into one of humanity's oldest instruments for shaping emotion, memory, and meaning. For all the brilliance hidden beneath temples and fortresses, nothing reveals the economic heartbeat of ancient Greece more clearly than the endless labyrinths carved beneath its mountains. Empires are often remembered for their armies, philosophers, and monuments, yet behind every golden age lies a source of wealth capable of financing ambition. In the case of Athens, that source did not rise toward the heavens but descended deep into the earth. Far below the Mediterranean landscape stretched an underground world where thousands of laborers extracted silver that would eventually transform a regional city-state into one of history's most influential civilizations. The irony is striking. While poets celebrated wisdom and artists sculpted beauty in sunlight, countless anonymous workers spent their lives in darkness, creating the financial foundation that made those cultural achievements possible. It reminds us that prosperity often rests upon invisible labor hidden from public memory. The mines themselves were astonishing feats of organization. Narrow shafts branched into intricate networks resembling the veins of a living organism, each tunnel carefully following precious mineral deposits through unforgiving stone. Engineers had to solve problems of ventilation, drainage, structural stability, and transportation without the benefit of modern machinery. Water constantly threatened to flood valuable passages, while unstable rock demanded continuous reinforcement. Every successful solution represented another small victory against nature, proving once again that human ingenuity flourishes when necessity leaves no alternative. Yet behind this remarkable engineering lies a difficult moral reality that deserves equal attention. Much of this labor was performed by enslaved individuals whose suffering became intertwined with the prosperity of the state. History often celebrates civilizations at their peak, while overlooking the human cost that supported their achievements. A balanced understanding requires acknowledging both the extraordinary innovation and the profound inequality that coexisted beneath the same society. The tunnels therefore become more than archaeological structures. They become reminders that progress and injustice have frequently advanced side by side throughout history. This uncomfortable truth encourages us to examine modern societies with similar honesty. Every era possesses hidden systems supporting visible success, and future generations may judge our own world by standards we have yet to imagine. The silver extracted from these mines did not remain buried as treasure. It became ships defending coastlines, public buildings inspiring citizens, trade routes connecting cultures, and artistic movements influencing the entire Western world. Wealth underground was converted into influence above ground through deliberate political choices. Resources alone never create greatness. Civilizations distinguish themselves by how effectively they transform natural assets into lasting institutions. Athens succeeded not merely because silver existed, but because leaders recognized its strategic value and invested it into capabilities extending far beyond immediate consumption. This principle remains timeless. Nations blessed with abundant resources often stagnate if vision is absent, while societies with limited resources can flourish through innovation and careful planning. The ancient Greek tunnels therefore teach an economic lesson as powerful as any military one. Sustainable strength emerges not from what a civilization possesses, but from what it chooses to build with those possessions. Deep beneath silent hills where forgotten miners once swung primitive tools, the foundations of philosophy, democracy, naval power, and cultural influence were quietly taking shape one fragment of silver at a time. Sometimes history's brightest achievements are forged in its darkest places. If wealth formed the foundation of Greek civilization, then information became its nervous system, and few resources proved more valuable during times of conflict than reliable communication. Long before telegraphs, satellites, or encrypted digital networks, ancient Greek city-states confronted a timeless problem. How do you coordinate strategy when enemies control the roads, monitor the harbors, and watch every visible route? The answer, once again, was to disappear beneath the earth. Hidden tunnels became silent corridors through which knowledge could travel beyond the reach of hostile eyes, proving that information has always been one of history's most decisive weapons. A message delivered at the right moment could save an army, preserve an alliance, or prevent an entire city from falling. The remarkable insight of Greek planners was recognizing that communication itself deserved infrastructure as sophisticated as walls or aqueducts. They understood that isolation could destroy even the strongest fortress, while connection created resilience that no blockade could easily overcome. In many ways, these underground networks resembled an ancient version of secure communication systems, designed not for speed alone, but for reliability under the worst imaginable circumstances. Trained messengers memorized complicated routes through total darkness, relying on carved symbols, rope guides, an instinct developed through years of repetition. Their profession demanded extraordinary mental discipline. One wrong turn could lead to endless confusion inside twisting stone corridors where every passage looked identical. Unlike soldiers fighting dramatic battles in open fields, these runners battled exhaustion, fear, and isolation with no audience to witness their courage. Their victories were measured not in captured banners, but in messages successfully delivered. It is a powerful reminder that many of history's greatest heroes remain anonymous precisely because success required remaining unseen. Yet tunnels carried more than military intelligence. They transmitted hope. During prolonged sieges, when citizens believed the outside world had forgotten them, secret communication preserved morale by proving allies still existed beyond enemy lines. Psychological endurance often depends upon the belief that one is not alone. A single hidden messenger emerging from darkness with news of reinforcements or friendly victories could restore confidence throughout an entire population. In this sense, underground passageways transported emotions as effectively as information. They connected isolated communities into larger networks of shared purpose. Modern crisis management still recognizes this principle. Clear communication reduces panic, strengthens trust, and enables coordinated action under pressure. Technology has changed dramatically, but the underlying human need remains identical. Whether transmitted through fiber optic cables or stone tunnels, reliable information forms the backbone of collective survival. There is also a philosophical beauty in these hidden systems. The civilization celebrated for public debate and open discussion quietly depended upon invisible pathways that ordinary citizens never saw. Ideas often appear to emerge suddenly into history, yet beneath every visible breakthrough lies an unseen network carrying knowledge across generations and communities. The tunnels of ancient Greece, therefore, become a metaphor extending far beyond archaeology. Progress itself frequently travels underground before rising into public view. Innovations begin in obscurity, nurtured by patient individuals whose contributions remain unnoticed until their accumulated efforts transform entire societies. Perhaps the greatest lesson hidden beneath the mountains is that civilizations endure not because everyone stands in the spotlight, but because countless unseen connections quietly hold everything together beneath the surface, until history finally reveals what was always there. As archaeologists continue uncovering forgotten passages beneath ancient Greek cities, one unavoidable question emerges. How many secrets still remain hidden beneath the modern world? Every generation assumes it has discovered most of history, only to be humbled by another accidental breakthrough made during construction projects, subway excavations, or scientific surveys. A worker breaks through what appears to be an ordinary stone wall, only to reveal a corridor untouched for 2,000 years. Dust settles, torchlight or flashlight illuminates the darkness, and suddenly the past is no longer an idea preserved in books, but a physical space waiting silently for someone to enter again. These discoveries force us to rethink not only ancient Greece, but also the way civilization itself preserves memory. History does not disappear all at once. Sometimes it simply waits beneath our feet until curiosity finds it again. Modern technology has transformed the search for these hidden worlds. Ground-penetrating radar, laser mapping, and three-dimensional scanning allow researchers to identify underground voids without disturbing the fragile structures above. Ironically, the most advanced scientific instruments are now being used to appreciate engineering, accomplished with little more than mathematics, observation, and determination. The comparison is humbling. While today's engineers rely on digital simulations and precision equipment, ancient builders achieved astonishing accuracy through patience and practical understanding accumulated across generations. Their work reminds us that intelligence should never be measured solely by technological sophistication. Wisdom often emerges from persistence, creativity, and an intimate relationship with the natural environment. Yet perhaps the greatest legacy of these tunnels lies not in their physical construction, but in the philosophy they represent. Every underground passage embodies preparation for uncertainty. The people who built them accepted that peace might end, harvests might fail, rulers might fall, and enemies might arrive unexpectedly. Rather than surrendering to fear, they invested years creating invisible systems capable of protecting future generations. This mindset remains profoundly relevant today. Modern societies face different threats: natural disasters, cyber attacks, economic instability, and climate challenges, but the principle remains identical. Resilience is rarely created during crisis. It is built quietly beforehand through decisions that may appear unnecessary until the day they become indispensable. Looking at the hidden infrastructure of ancient Greece, one cannot help but notice a striking contrast with modern culture's obsession with visibility. We celebrate skyscrapers, monumental architecture, and technological displays designed to impress immediately. The Greeks certainly appreciated magnificent public buildings, yet some of their most consequential achievements were intentionally concealed. Their greatest engineering triumphs succeeded precisely because almost nobody noticed them. There is wisdom in that humility. Not every valuable contribution requires recognition, applause, or public admiration. Some of the most important work any generation performs will remain invisible, supporting countless lives without attracting attention. Parents raising children, teachers shaping minds, engineers maintaining infrastructure, scientists conducting obscure research, all participate in hidden labor that sustains civilization just as surely as ancient tunnels sustained besieged cities. As we prepare to conclude this journey beneath Greece, the tunnels become more than archaeological wonders. They become symbols of foresight, resilience, sacrifice, and quiet excellence, reminding us that the strongest foundations of any civilization are often the ones hidden from view, patiently carrying the weight of history without ever asking to be seen. When people think about the legacy of ancient Greece, they usually picture philosophers discussing ideas beneath open skies, athletes competing for glory, or magnificent temples standing proudly against the horizon. Yet after exploring the forgotten world beneath those monuments, another image begins to emerge, one far quieter but perhaps even more profound. Hidden beneath marble columns and crowded marketplaces lay a second civilization built not for admiration but for survival. Its corridors carried water instead of applause, protected lives instead of reputations, and preserved futures instead of celebrating the present. That invisible world reminds us that history is often sustained by forces nobody notices until they disappear. The tunnels of Greece were never meant to impress foreign visitors. They existed because wise societies understand that resilience matters more than appearance. Long after statues lose their faces and palaces crumble into ruins, the principles that inspired those underground networks continue shaping humanity. Build for tomorrow, prepare for uncertainty, and never assume visible strength alone guarantees survival. Those lessons echo through every era. Modern cities now hide power grids, communication cables, transportation systems, emergency shelters, and digital infrastructure beneath their streets. Although technology has evolved beyond anything the ancient Greeks could imagine, our dependence on hidden systems has only increased. Civilization itself functions like one enormous underground network. Millions of people perform essential work every day without public recognition, maintaining hospitals, transportation, water supplies, communications, and countless services that allow ordinary life to continue. Their contributions resemble those forgotten tunnel builders whose names vanished while their work endured for millennia. Perhaps true greatness has never belonged solely to those standing in the spotlight, but also to those quietly strengthening foundations beneath everyone else. Looking deeper, the tunnels offer a surprisingly personal lesson. Every individual constructs invisible foundations throughout life. Knowledge acquired in silence, discipline practiced without applause, relationships patiently nurtured, habits developed through repetition, and character strengthened by adversity all become unseen structures supporting future success. Others may admire visible achievements, but they rarely witness the hidden preparation that made those achievements possible. Ancient Greece understood that reality better than many societies do today. What exists beneath determines what can safely rise above. There is also something deeply hopeful about the fact that archaeologists continue discovering forgotten passages after thousands of years. It suggests humanity has not exhausted its past or its potential. Every buried corridor uncovered reminds us that history still holds unanswered questions capable of changing our understanding of civilization. Curiosity remains one of our greatest tools because every discovery reveals not only what previous generations accomplished, but also what modern generations might still achieve through imagination and perseverance. As we leave this underground journey behind and return to the sunlight, perhaps the greatest treasure hidden beneath Greece was never silver, secret escape routes, or military strategy. It was a philosophy quietly carved into stone. Civilizations endure because they invest in things future generations cannot yet see. The strongest walls may eventually fall, the richest empires may eventually fade, and the grandest monuments may eventually collapse, but wisdom embedded in thoughtful preparation can outlive them all. So the next time you see the ruins of an ancient city standing proudly against the sky, remember to wonder what lies beneath your feet, because history's greatest masterpieces are often hidden in darkness, waiting patiently for someone curious enough to look beyond the surface. And perhaps that is the greatest lesson of all, that the future is built not only by what we choose to display to the world, but by what we quietly create when no one is watching. The hidden tunnels of ancient Greece teach us that lasting greatness is built on invisible foundations. Preparation, resilience, quiet discipline, and long-term thinking often shape history far more than public displays of power. Just as ancient civilizations survived through what they hid beneath the earth, our own future depends on the unseen habits, knowledge, and values we build beneath the surface of everyday life.